Welcome to Schoolin' Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds, featuring prominent leaders, subject matter experts, and thought innovators with their perspectives on the current challenges facing K-12 education. I'm your host, Larissa Napolitan, a former teacher, instructional coach, and a member of the Branching Minds team, here to lead conversations with educational leaders and experts and to shine a light on phenomenal educators and those that are on a mission to transform our schools and the lives of students. If you didn't know, Branching Minds provides a ton of great resources for implementing MTSS, like our newsletter and our upcoming live virtual mini summit in June. Check out our show notes for links to sign up for both. There are many of our listeners that are school and district leaders, and you're working hard to lead implementation of MTSS or other school initiatives. And so on this podcast, we really love to be able to share tools and insight for leaders. And today I'm excited to bring on a guest to talk about one of those tools for leaders. So I'm excited to welcome Crossman from the Branching Minds team, who's a part of our professional services team. So welcome, Caitlin. Glad to
Thank
have
you.
you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Well, I would love for you to share just a little bit about your background, and then I have a kind of fun question for you. So go ahead and you can share, and I'll dive into
Sure.
that.
Sure. So I've been in public education for over a decade, and I have my degree in elementary education. So I taught multiple elementary grade levels and then got my master's in educational technology and became an instructional coach. And then the need presented itself for us to have more interventionists. So then I became a tier 3 interventionist in reading and math, K-5, and found myself plopped into our building's MTSS leadership team and absolutely loved that work and all of the things that we were doing. And it led to me being an educational consultant, which then I absolutely loved doing. And that led me here to Branching Minds, being a professional services manager. So I'm just really excited to share a little bit about this tool today.
Awesome. Well, and I know that it's an adjustment going from teaching kids to teaching adults. I did that as well as an instructional coach, and so there there's a lot of pros and cons and different things about that. And so I would love to know, maybe kind of based on your current role and your time as an education consultant and instructional coach, what's your favorite thing about teaching kids versus teaching adults?
Oh, such a good question. So I think, especially being in the elementary setting, and even more so as an interventionist, teaching kids and being able to witness that moment where they have gained a skill that they didn't have before and they could do something that they weren't able to do previously. Just that sense of like accomplishment and pride that they have, big or small, whatever that milestone is. I loved witnessing that and being like a little small part of helping them achieve that. And so that was my favorite thing about teaching kids, especially as they are, they are gaining so many skills all the time being that young. But those kids that present with, skill deficiencies, the moment that they've mastered something is just like, it's beautiful. I love it. Yeah.
I'm going to answer the question because mine is that I probably laugh a lot more with kids than I do adults. And I taught middle schools, so there was a lot of we just couldn't take ourselves very seriously and had a
Yeah,
lot of
it
fun.
takes a special soul, I feel like, for middle school, and you have to laugh, maybe to keep from crying because, you know, there's there's probably some mean things that, the middle
Oh,
school
yeah.
say
Yeah,
to
maybe
you.
one day on the podcast, I'll share you, all the things that the insults of a middle school girl, especially about your fashion, yeah,
Harsh.
it's harsh, and so you can't take it seriously, but well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's always fun to talk to especially former educators and people who I've similar roles with. But today we really want to talk about just how we can help leaders in that MTSS implementation, particularly just how to go about the work. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. But I would love for you to maybe you get to lead and train a lot of educators through that implementation process. And so I would love to talk about some of the common challenges and maybe how we can kind of go about avoiding some of those challenges in that implementation process. I know that's kind of a big question. You could pick like one or two.
It's a big question, but it's also something that I talk about all day long and I hear all day long from educators. There's a lot of factors that can go into those kind of pitfalls in terms of implementation. There's inequitable identification. There's that sense of overwhelming feeling from having so much data to look at. And then what do we do with all of this data that we're just staring at? And kind of missing that collective efficacy. Where is our infrastructure and how are we collaborating and communicating across teams? Um, so one of the things that I think is really my favorite thing about working with adults and teaching adults is there's typically this sense of gratitude that educators have. They are spend so much time serving others and trying to do so many things for others, but having a tool or a resource, having a thought partner is so crucial in their work. And there's this overwhelming sense of gratitude when they have it. So when I hear people talk about the pitfalls of implementation, I think about this tool that we're going to talk about all the time. I was in a session and I heard a principal say that MTSS was too big and too complex to ever succeed, and it was like a dagger to the heart at first. But then I was like, what this person needs is they just need to prioritize. They need this impact effort tool that we're going to talk about today. So I think there's a lot that educators are facing.
Well, and I think that even you kind of named that kind of common challenge that leaders could face is in the midst of trying to implement an MTSS infrastructure. Many people are like, this is too big. This is too much. There's no way that we can actually feasibly do this. And I think that's a topic we talk a lot about around here is just like, how do we help educators feasibly and sustainably implement MTSS, which we know can be effective, but in all that schools are asked to do, it can feel really insurmountable of like, there's no way we're going to actually do it to the full effect. So why even try? I think there's that kind of attitude. And so you're right. It is sometimes coming down to like in that overwhelm, how do we prioritize? And so I would love for you to kind of dive into this tool that we've talked about here at Brinchy Minds, and we love to share about it, called the impact versus effort tool. Or is that how you describe it? Is that the name of it?
Yes, I call it the impact effort map.
Okay.
Um, Mostly because it is a visual tool. I'm a visual learner, and sometimes I just need to write things down and like see it. So I always call it an impact effort map because we have these kind of competing realities sometimes, impact versus effort. And this tool allows you to visualize all of the things that are filling your brain and all of the things that you feel like you have to do. And you really can map them out into what is going to take, a lot of effort versus minimal effort, and what is going to have a really high impact versus a low impact.
So since this is the audio medium, I think what we're gonna do is maybe I would love for you to kind of talk a little bit about what does this matrix look like, and that way the listeners can kind of visualize, and then they can click on the show notes for more information and for the map itself to have in front of them. But
So the impact effort map it's a 4 quadrant matrix. And so we have one, that you can link and go into, but you could honestly make it on your own too. It's very simple. So you are going to think about this as first. I always recommend to people that they do their brain dump first. So a list of all the things that they want to get accomplished, all of the to-dos, right? And then you're going to sort those to dos on the 4 quadrants. So, thinking about that kind of horizontal line, things above that would be your low effort tasks, easy things to accomplish. And below that would be your high effort tasks. And then that line that's running vertically, to the left of that, those are going to be your low impact. And to the right of that, you're going to have your high impact things. So I like to think about it as, if you have something that is um, low effort but high impact on the quadrant, you're going to think about that as a do now. That's a quick win. If it's something that's high impact and high effort, that's a major project that you're going to schedule out, and you're probably going to have maybe even an impact effort map within that impact effort map for the things that you want to get done. So it's really just about sorting all of the things that you want to get accomplished.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's really important. I mean, I wish I would have had this tool as an early educator. This is a great tool to kind of decide, what is the most important and what is going to like have the biggest impact. And you're right, those really easy wins, like the things that make a really big impact, but are kind of small things, I think is determining what those things are. And I think that it's really easy to versus the seat that you're sitting in. The leader can see it one way versus the educator. Have you had those kind of conversations? Because I imagine that implementing this kind of map, because it's a matrix, right? Like it's
Right.
four squares. I can kind of sense like you put that in a session with some leaders and some teachers and you get some conflicting perspectives. Have you encountered that before?
Well, one of the things about this tool is that it can be used for an individual. I've
Mhm.
used it in my professional work like you have. I've also used it personally. Like I have 27,000 things to do. What am I going to do first, right? But you can also use it with a team. Even at Branching Minds, our professional services team, when we were mapping out our goals for the year, we put everything out and then we rated them together and we were thinking about what is a common theme. And if someone had rated it high effort, but someone else rated it low effort, we had a conversation about that. Is it because some of the workload would fall more on you than me? And how can we share that workload? So it can take some time if there are some conflicting ideas, but I also think that makes the work even more powerful, kind of doing an analysis of what do we as a collective group think is going to be the most impactful work and how can we get that across the finish line. So I've seen it being used both individually and with teams, and it brings up some really good conversation when you do it with a team of people.
Oh yeah, I imagine so because you're right. I think sometimes even if you sit in the seat of like if I'm out of the classroom, I may not understand how the effort that takes to complete this kind of task or versus in the classroom when I've realized, oh, this the effort that goes on behind the scenes. I did
Right.
not know that picking student of the month and doing all that stuff is really hard. That's just a small example. I just think sometimes your perspective shifts how you view that. Hi there. I'm interrupting this episode with another MTSS hero shout out. This week, I want to celebrate Lene, an elementary teacher from Wyoming. She was nominated by her peer, Susan, and this is what Susan shared. Lene is new in the role this year, but that hasn't slowed her down one bit. She has been relentless in helping kids succeed. She leads all of us interventionists and helps us with computer issues nonstop, but never complains. I believe we are doing a better job and helping kids better because of her. Thank you for all you do, Lene. Your school and your students are lucky to have you. Now, back to our conversation. Do you have any specific examples of different types of work within the MTSS implementation that would kind of go on the different areas of this map?
Absolutely. I mean, we can even start kind of from the beginning of,
Yeah, okay.
okay, so our district is talking about this four-letter thing called MTSS. We're supposed to be launching it. What are we going to do, right? And I think one of the things that is really kind of a pitfall in MTSS is people think about all of these different initiatives or all of these different policies without realizing that that is MTSS. So I talk to educators all the time and they'll say something like, well, we're trying to launch MTSS in the district, but the state just mandated dyslexia legislation and we've got to screen these students. We have to communicate to the families about interventions and we're just really focused on that. but that is MTSS, right? So if we had our MTSS team built, we can talk about, well, MTSS is just identifying students who need support, right? So what is something that we need to do that can be in compliance with this policy while also moving the needle on MTSS? And that can be something as simple as, let's carve out time to do macro and micro level data analysis. So 3 times a year, we're going to get our MTSS team together and we're going to do macro level data analysis on our universal screening data. That's low effort. It's super high impact. That is a quick win. We're going to
Mhm.
get this team together 3 times a year. We're going to look at data, right?
Yeah. And it's low effort because especially if you plan that ahead of time, right? Like, if you put that
Exactly.
on the calendar and it's low, maybe it's yeah, minimal effort in the moment to plan the time, but it impacts because you've blocked off that time to have to take to for data analysis, yeah.
Exactly. And if we think about too, in that same regard, someone is saying, well, we're really worried about our students' social emotional and learning behaviors. And we were trying to adopt a new curriculum. Well, that's MTSS too. And that MTSS team can say, okay, that is super high effort, but also high impact. That's a major project. We're going to schedule that. And we're going to have these timelines along the way to say, okay, the first thing we're going to do is get a Google form out to the staff who would like to be involved in vetting some
Mhm.
SEL curriculum. Then, how can we get some vendors in to do presentations to us? Are we going to maybe try out a pilot first? So even though there's all of these different initiatives, they're not competing with MTSS. They're
Mhm.
working within that framework. So I always try and tell educators to prioritize but don't abandon. And the impact effort map can really help that. So two different things that we're trying to tackle, we can tackle them with that impact effort map by doing those quick wins. What are we going to schedule later? What can we delegate out to another team to take care of for us?
Mhm. Well, and even I think in that, you just deciding of like, what are the things that are, the most necessary to put our time and effort towards, like the SEL kind of stuff. I mean, mental health and all those things, that's very crucial to helping kids learn, like the academic outcomes won't, you can't just focus on academic outcomes only, like the other things that go with it. And so I think that that's a really key point. I would love to talk a little bit about how prioritization helps with that sort of adaptability that schools, may encounter of just like needing to adapt to the needs of the students at front. How can that, this practice sort of help them, to have optimal outcomes, but sort of address things that they don't anticipate?
Sure. Well, two things come to mind when I think about that. One, I think that communication with this effort and impact tool is really key. I really think about that as kind of the accountability piece. Like, here are the things that we say are priorities for us. The other thing is, it's okay to also adjust, right? So we can keep ourselves on track by sharing our priorities with all of our stakeholders, whoever's going to be involved in this work. But it's also never really done. Kind of like our to do lists are never really done. We don't want to make this map and sort out on the matrix and then say, okay, well, we're all done. We also need to continually come back to the
Mhm.
matrix and shift. Where can we celebrate? Did we get that quick win? Can we check that off of our list? Is there something that we can move because we're finding, you know what? That was easier than we thought, or in a lot of cases, unfortunately, this is a lot harder than we thought. So we we need to schedule that for later, or we need to outsource this and delegate it to someone else. So we also need to be really mindful about coming back to it and giving ourselves the grace then to adjust and adapt as we're having those conversations and kind of sharing progress and milestones, or even roadblockers into what's keeping us from accomplishing this task.
Yeah. Well, and I think responsiveness is key to sort of what the needs are at the moment because, you know, the sort of priorities of one school year or one semester may be different than the next. Working in a school, like, needs shift, and so being able to be responsive and adjust your priorities based on semester time of year or even just the group of students that you have, is really key, because I think that's sometimes the struggle too when people think about initiatives. Oh, we have this 5-year initiative. Year 1 versus year 3 or year 4 may look different based on the needs of your students, but I think if you have the pillars of, like, these are our overarching priorities within MTSS, then you can kind of respond of, like, where can we need to put our effort in? Because maybe you've adopted that the SEL curriculum implementation goes smoothly and you find a vendor that everyone really loves, and it goes really well, and then you can kind of shift your priority, or even, I think, deepen the priorities a little bit too.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think one of the things that is so great about this tool is it's also reflective. So
Mm,
not only is it helping you to be more efficient, right, and prioritize so that workflow hopefully is a little more streamlined and you're not trying to do so many things at once, but hopefully it's bringing you back and allowing you to say, "Oh, you know what? This implementation is really great. Like this is going better than we could have hoped for. What can we do now? What's next for us?"
yeah, we'll share, the impact versus effort map in the show notes, and I think this is it's a common kind of practice. I mean, I remember kinda looking up more information about it, and we've, adapted one for our team, and I think we have a blog post that goes along with that. Thank you so much for, talking through this, because I do think this is kind of a leadership tool that maybe some people are aware of, and this is just even a reminder to do this kind of work, and I even think it's really great reflective, and if you have a year, I know we've all had these school years where there's a lot of things happening, right? There may be a lot of different, small or big initiatives, and so this can sometimes help, schools prioritize or leaders prioritize their work. And so, thank you so much for coming and talking about this.
You're welcome.
I'm sure I will have you back as, to talk about another tip or tool. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Schoolin' Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds. Go ahead and subscribe to our feed wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, if you are enjoying our content, would you do us a favor and rate and review our podcast on iTunes? This helps others find our podcast and lets us know how much you love what we're creating. Branching Minds is an educational technology company using learning sciences and technology to help districts effectively personalize learning through MTSS. To learn more about us, check out our website, branchingminds.com, or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn at Branching Minds.